Now we have a graph example. So let's take a look at the graph given. The graph is about the value of a vehicle. The x-axis, which is our independent variable, represents the time in years, and the y-axis is the value of the vehicles in dollars. So what does the slope represent and what does the y-intercept represent? Before we can answer these two questions, we need to find the slope and the y-intercept value. So how do we find slope from a graph? We need to pick two good points. Okay, so remember, slope is how much something is changing. So after picking our two good points, we're going to use rise over run. So the two good points that I'm going to pick will be this point and this point. Now, remember, if you are using rise over run, you need to check the increments that you have for your x-axis and your y-axis. Okay, so um, how many units do I have to go down to get to the second point? And that will be 1,000 units down and then one to the right. So it's a decrease of $1,000 in 1 year. The slope of this graph is 1,000 over 1, which is equal to 1,000. Now, what does that 1,000 mean? The value of the vehicle decreased by 1,000 per year. Okay. What about the y-intercept? Remember, the y-intercept is the starting value. So what is the starting value of the vehicle that is represented by this graph? The y-intercept is where the graph touches the y-axis. That's our y-intercept value over there. So the value of the vehicle is $16,000. So the value of the vehicle began at $16,000. Now we have a discrete graph. So discrete means non-continuous. So we have distinct points, but these points are not connected to create a line. Okay. So the graph is about items needed to make $200. The x-axis is the number of sandwiches and the y-axis is the number of bags of chips. Now we are asked to find what does the y-intercept represent and what does the x-intercept represent. So remember, the y-intercept is where the graph touches the y-axis and the x-intercept is where the graph intersects with the x-axis. Okay, so what's our y-intercept? For this graph, it's going to be 200. So what does the y-intercept 200 represent? Selling 200 bags of chips and 0 sandwiches. Now what about our x-intercept? So the x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. So that will be 50. What does the x-intercept 50 represent? Selling 0 bags of chips and 50 sandwiches.